It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I am Tanvi Taneja. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you the day's big stories from across India and the world. My colleague Nick Harper is joining me from Washington, D.C. Nick, very good to have you on the show.
Good morning, Tanvi. It's 9 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. It's 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Leaders in the AI space are meeting in New York. We'll bring you the details, and we'll also bring you the latest news from the war in Ukraine. But first, the headlines.
Israel forces continue the offensive against Hamas in southern Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urges all to speak up on Hamas's sexual violence against Israeli women on October the 7th. US President Joe Biden says that part of his motivation to run for a second term in 2024 is to prevent Donald Trump from returning as president. Says he's unsure of his re-election if Trump was not running. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson apologizes for the loss of life during the coronavirus pandemic inquiry. Says he underestimated the pace and scale of the COVID-19 challenge.
That I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims.
And India's Home Minister Amit Shah asserts Pakistan-occupied Kashmir belongs to India. 2 bills related to Jammu and Kashmir passed in the lower house. Now, first news of the Israel-Hamas conflict. The Israeli army released videos on Wednesday showing ground troops operating in Gaza and conducting aerial strikes on Hamas targets. This comes just a day after the military reached the heart of southern Gaza. The footage shows soldiers engaged in combat in the town of Khan Yunis in residential areas, armored vehicles and tanks firing ammunition. A video filmed inside a classroom showed soldiers revealing what the Israeli army says was an explosive device that was placed inside a school. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces troops on Tuesday discovered one of the largest cache of weapons during their operations in northern Gaza Strip. The cache, which was located near a health clinic and a school, included dozens of anti-tank missiles and explosives, long-range rockets and grenades, and several drones. The IDF says some of the weapons were destroyed, while others were taken to Israel for further investigation.
Last night, the 50th Battalion had uncovered many weapons in the area we are in now. In the weapon stockpile, we can see hundreds of anti-tank missiles and other strategic weapons, such as unmanned drone and long-range missiles. We are here in the heart of residential neighborhood. We can see near us a big complex of schools.
Now, as Israeli Defense Forces march on with their Gaza operations, the army spokesperson called on the international community to take urgent action to help free hostages. He added that every minute of hostage captivity endangered their lives.
As the IDF expands its operations to dismantle Hamas in Gaza, we have not lost sight, not for one moment, of our critical mission to rescue our hostages, to do everything in our power to bring our hostages home. This is an urgent call for action. The international community must take action. The Red Cross must have access to the hostages that are in the hands of Hamas. 138 hostages, children, women, men, the elderly, have been in Hamas captivity for over 60 days. In brutal and inhumane conditions. Every day, every hour, every minute is critical.
On to America now. U.S. President Joe Biden turned 81 years old last month. In the latest, Biden said that he was not sure he would be seeking re-election if his Republican competitor Donald Trump did not also contest. My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, Biden again painting Trump as dangerous for American democracy?
Thanks, Tanvi. Yes, that's right. It seems to be the latest attack line from the current president. Joe Biden has said part of his motivation to run for a second term in 2024 is to prevent Donald Trump from returning to the White House. Now, Biden has made those remarks even as Democratic voters have expressed their concerns regarding the president's age. Biden applauded the former Republican Senator Liz Cheney, who has warned this week that the United States will be sleepwalking into dictatorship if former President Trump is re-elected. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley will face off in the fourth Republican presidential debate later on this evening. Donald Trump is not attending. He's up by more than 40 percentage points in most opinion polls. He said that he will not become a dictator if he becomes U.S. president again, except on day one. Turning to artificial intelligence now, and industry experts are gathering in Manhattan today for the 8th annual AI Summit to forecast the industry's trajectory. The summit, spanning 2 days, unites knowledge leaders, policymakers and corporate executives for discussions and workshops. Amid a global push for tech regulation, it certainly assumes significance. DD India's Sally Patterson sent us this report.
It's an opportunity to rub shoulders with some of the biggest names in AI. Representatives from technology companies, financial institutes and governments are set to hold talks and then stick around for networking afterwards. Tech giants including Microsoft, OpenAI and Google are all on the bill. Organisers say the summit, held on December 6th and 7th, will showcase how businesses are implementing and financing AI in a rapidly changing world. It comes just over a month after the UK held a major AI safety summit, looking at the risks of the economy and the industry. World leaders around the world are grappling with how to regulate it. In New York this week, the risks of AI will once again be in focus, tackling bias in technology, for example, but also opportunities for healthcare, finance, security, and more. Through speaker events, workshops, and feedback sessions, it's designed to be a very hands-on event. It promises to upskill employees through interactive and in-depth training sessions. And it is certainly an investment, with delegate tickets costing $2,400. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
A Hong Kong-based research lab is trying to revolutionise the fashion industry by creating AI-generated clothes. More details in our next report.
Imagine a world where you could change the color of your clothes by making a simple hand gesture. This is what happened at the Milan Fashion Week, where models donned clothes made of a glowing fabric which combines yarn with polymeric optical fibers. The material has been developed by Aid Lab, which is a research platform established by the Hong Kong Polytechnic University and UK's Royal College of Art. It focuses on the integration of artificial intelligence and design.
The POFs are actually transmitters of light. So light travels from one point to the other. So with the light traveling from one point to the other, the usual POFs, you'll find that light is only emitted at the tips. But for us, we actually do a surface treatment so that the light actually also travels through the lateral side of the fabric.
The fabric contains an integrated camera which uses AI algorithms to generate colored illuminations. It can also be controlled by mobiles and remote. People can even project photos from their phones onto the fabric. The textile has created waves across the fashion world, but its makers feel that the multi-sensory technology behind it can also help the medical industry.
Multisensory stimulation is something that is very common for, it's a form of well-being for a lot of people with dementia, people with learning challenges. So it actually encourages their well-being and gives them a sense of calm, and also a very easy way for them to have engagement and direct response.
Researchers also underscore the textile's sustainability benefits and say that it could reduce clothing waste. Anu Kaushik for DD India.
Saudi Arabia has asked the United States to show restraint in responding to attacks by Yemen's Houthis against ships in the Red Sea, as Riyadh seeks to contain spillover from the Hamas-Israel war. The Iran-lined Houthis have entered the conflict that has spread around the Middle East since the October 7th attack. They've been attacking vessels in vital shipping lanes and firing drones and missiles at Israel. Turning to the UK now, and the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is attending a two-day public inquiry over his government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Boris Johnson has apologised for the loss of life in the pandemic while delivering his statement during the inquiry. But he's also defended some of the ways in which the government handled the pandemic. The inquiry has already heard damaging testimonies about Johnson's handling of the crisis. The former UK Prime Minister is facing 2 days of questioning as part of the official investigation into why Britain ended up with one of the highest death tolls globally from the pandemic.
That I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims. I think that it would certainly be fair to say of me, the entire Whitehall establishment, scientific community included, our advisors included, that we underestimated the scale and the pace of the challenge.
DD India's Ollie Barrett reports from London.
Boris Johnson is expected to use his appearance at the COVID-19 inquiry to apologise for mistakes that were made by his government in the handling of the pandemic. But we also expect him to mount a pretty robust defence of some of the government responses to the COVID-19 outbreak. For example, we expect that Boris Johnson will point to things like the rollout of vaccines in this country more quickly than was seen in many other parts of the world. But up to this point, the questioning of various witnesses has painted a sometimes chaotic and dysfunctional picture of the Downing Street operation that the former Prime Minister was running during the COVID pandemic. We expect some fairly robust questioning, for example, about the timing of lockdowns imposed by Boris Johnson's government. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, when he spoke to the COVID inquiry, suggested that he believed that if the UK had locked down earlier, at the beginning and in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, then thousands of lives could have been saved. We also expect that Boris Johnson will be asked about Partygate, that row, those controversies about parties in and around Downing Street during periods of lockdown, which were so controversial when all of the details came out and led to the eventual downfall of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. We also expect Boris Johnson to deny allegations made by an aide during evidence to this inquiry that he was not focused on COVID-19 at the beginning of the pandemic because he was away writing a book on Shakespeare. This is very much expected to be the most high-profile moment of the COVID-19 inquiry so far. Boris Johnson will be questioned on Wednesday and then on Thursday. The inquiry was set up by his government to try and go through the preparation and the responses by the UK government to the COVID-19 pandemic and also learn lessons for the future. Ollie Barrett in London reporting for DD India.
Now on to the latest in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia's defence ministry has claimed its forces have shot down 2 Ukrainian MiG-29 fighters and 1 helicopter, and it's intercepted an anti-radiation missile. Russian forces repelled Ukrainian offensives in Kupiansk, Liman, and destroyed Ukrainian armoured vehicles. On the same day, Ukraine's armed forces claimed that its troops had destroyed Russia's electronic warfare systems. According to Ukrainian officials, people's homes and commercial buildings were damaged by drone debris in various regions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited injured children in a hospital the day that Ukraine celebrates St. Nicholas Day. President Zelensky met Ukraine's first child to have received a prosthetic limb as a result of war-related injuries. The children undergoing rehabilitation in the hospital gave handmade presents to the president. Russian lawmakers will vote on Thursday on a proposal to hold presidential elections on March the 17th, when Vladimir Putin is expected to seek the presidency for the 6th time. The council is the upper chamber of parliament, and it's responsible for setting the election date. Putin is yet to declare whether he'll run for the presidency. Alexei Navalny and Vladimir Kara-Murza, two of the best-known opposition politicians, are both serving decades in penal colonies, and many of Putin's other leading critics have fled abroad. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Tambi, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Nick. Nick Harper joining us from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on the show. Russia-UAE relations at an unprecedented level, says Russian President Vladimir Putin at the start of Abu Dhabi talks. And Gujarat's Garba dance goes global, grabs a spot on UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibility. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday, 8 p.m. only on DD India.
You're watching DD India Global. Welcome back. I am Tanvi Taneja. Now, in the latest developments from the COP28 summit underway in Dubai, United States Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry highlighted substantial advancements in the ongoing discussions. Stressing the imperative need to confront climate change, Kerry shared key insights into critical agreements and initiatives shaping the trajectory of the conference.
We've said consistently that we need to do what we need to do to follow the science. So, the science requires net zero emissions by 2050. And the science requires that we be at about a 43% minimum reduction by 2030.
Now, the European Union has declared the urgent need for COP28 to signal the beginning of the end of fossil fuels. Earlier in the day, UN Climate Chief Simon Stale issued a stern message urging nations to transcend posturing, set ambitious goals, and collectively chart a course to terminate the fossil fuel era.
I want this COP to mark the beginning of the end for fossil fuels. This is a key part for the EU and for all of our negotiating mandates, meaning that all 27 European member states want this to be part of the negotiated outcome.
Now, amid all this, Russian President Vladimir Putin is in the Middle East and he's discussing oil, OPEC Plus, in his talks with United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. He said that relations between Russia and the UAE are at an unprecedented high. President bin Zayed said that UAE is Russia's largest trading partner in the Gulf. On to EU-China meet. The leaders of the European Union's two most important institutions are meeting President Xi Jinping in Beijing on Thursday for the 24th edition of the EU-China Summit. The 23rd edition of the summit was held 4 years ago before COVID-19 pandemic struck us all. DD India's Andrew Wood reports from Hong Kong.
Well, this summit hasn't created as much hoopla and expectation as President Xi and President Joe Biden's meeting in San Francisco last month, the first time they met for a year. But remember that the European Union leaders, the presidents of the European Council and the European Commission, have not met President Xi Jinping in person for 4 years, since before the pandemic. Now, there's some familiar subjects that they're probably going to discuss. Economics. Now, the Europeans, for example, are trying to balance their trade relationship with China. They're both very big trade partners, with the attempting to decouple from China, or at least trying to reduce the risks of doing business with China, particularly for supply chains. They're also said to be say that they're going to be talking about human rights issues, and no doubt they'll want to find out more from President Xi Jinping about what he perhaps really thinks about what is going on in the Middle East and what is going on with Russia and its invasion of Ukraine. Now, for their part, the Chinese in particular, they seem to want to discuss the issue of fairness. There's been an investigation going on for about 3 months now by the European Commission into electric vehicles, or the electric vehicle industry in China, and they're being investigated because the EU suspects there are some illegal government subsidies there. And there's another investigation coming up soon as well, probably into a European Union investigation into the Chinese steel industry, again to see whether things are, whether there's some fairness there. At the same time, both sides are not really, well, they're playing down expectations that there's going to be a big breakthrough in this meeting. They're saying, so the Europeans have been saying they're not expecting to have a big statement or agreement or communique at the end of the meeting, and also they're not expecting any real concrete breakthroughs. But nevertheless, China's economy is in trouble. It probably needs to talk to people at the moment. There's still plenty of issues in international relations that could cause problems between the European Union and China. So it is good that after a 4 years gap, the leaders are talking to each other in person again. In Hong Kong, I'm Andrew Wood, reporting for DD India.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. The Asiatic Society of Bangladesh organized a seminar on A Tale of Friendship, 52 years of recognition to Bangladesh by India on Wednesday in Dhaka. On the occasion, Minister of Home Affairs of Bangladesh was the chief guest. In his address, Bangladesh Home Minister hailed India for its assistance and stated that the liberation struggle would not have been successful in just over 9 months without India's proactive participation. Doctors and healthcare executives in Italy staged a nationwide strike in protest over proposed pension cuts. The protesters in Rome are also demanding a list of changes in the latest budget, including improvement in working conditions for doctors. Italian trade unions say that about 1/4 of the total staff are set to retire by the year 2025, and the government is trying to plug that gap by hiring more staff from abroad. A woman had a lucky escape after a speeding car smashed into a shop but missed her by mere inches in Peru. The vehicle demolished the electric pole outside the shop, but miraculously, the woman escaped unscathed. Next news from India. Loksabha, India's lower house of parliament, today passed the Jammu and Kashmir Reservation Bill 2023 and Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Bills. The Jammu and Kashmir Reservation Act provides reservation in appointment in state government posts and admission to professional institutions for certain reserved categories, while the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019 provides for the reorganization of the state of Jammu and Kashmir into the Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. The bill increases the total number of seats in the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly from 83 to 90. Replying in the lower house of parliament, India's Home Minister Amit Shah said that 2 seats have been reserved for the Kashmiri migrant community members.
2 सीटें कश्मीरी विस्थापितों के लिए होगी जो घाटी से विस्थापित हुए हैं और 1 सीट पाक ऑक्युपाई जम्मू कश्मीर के विस्थापित व्यक्तियों के लिए नामित की जाएगी। इसमें से एक महिला होना जरूरी है।
India's Home Minister Amit Shah further said that 24 seats have been reserved for Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
जम्मू में पहले 37 सीटें थी, अब 43 हुई है, 43 हुई है। कश्मीर में पहले 46 थी, अब 47 हुई है और पाक ऑक्युपाई कश्मीर की 24 सीटें, क्योंकि वो हमारा है, हमने रिजर्व रखी है।
Garba, a folk dance originating from India's western state of Gujarat, has achieved a momentous milestone. It has secured a position on UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage. We have a report. Garba has gone global. The dance form, which originates from India's western state of Gujarat, is now part of UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Garba is a devotional dance which is performed at all joyous occasions. The decision to include it in UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity was taken during the 18th Intergovernmental Committee meet in Botswana. Garba is the 15th ICH element from India to become part of the list. Durga Puja, Kumbh Mela, Chau Dance, Kalbelia and more have already become part of this ICH list. Garba has devotional and ritualistic roots. It's specially performed during Navratri, a 9-day Hindu festival worshipping goddess Durga or Shakti. Several member states congratulated India on this achievement. To mark the occasion, a troupe of dancers from the Indian Council for Cultural Relations showcased the dance form at the meeting venue. And in India, the Gujarat government is now organizing several Garba events in different districts to celebrate this milestone. Tanvi Taneja for DD India. So that was Garba, the dance of devotion, love and togetherness for you. That's all in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja. From my entire team in New Delhi, thank you for watching. Namaskar.